So now we're starting to get into some functions that look a little bit crazier, not as easy as something we've remembered. But again, in the same respect, guys, f times g of x is basically saying just take f of x and multiply times g of x. OK? And in this case, we're not going to be working a lot with like simplifying. The thing more, our main concern is if there is like some basic simplification to do it. But in this case, we're not going to want to distribute with these absolute value. We can just leave the answer. We're not going to do anything crazy mathematically. But here we're looking at that. So we can just leave this as basically the product, right? Because the absolute value is not parentheses. That means the absolute value of x minus 2. So as far as the basic idea of this, we're going to keep it the same. But what I wanted to look at is let's look at the domain. So again, knowing our parent functions here, this might look like a more difficult equation. But if you guys really think about it, the cubic function has a domain of all real numbers. The absolute value function, doesn't matter what transformations I have, the domain is all real numbers. So even on the front end, you're like, oh, well, I'd much rather do something with like quadratics or linear equations. I don't want to deal with this. But if I'm really just asking you to find the product and then find the domain, you're like, oh, it's all real numbers and all real numbers. So guess what the domain is of the product? All real numbers. There's no reason that there's going to be any kind of restriction or I'm going to throw anything at you, right? If both all real numbers and you just multiply them, then it's still going to be all real numbers. So don't let like the idea of what the equations look like, make it seem like you can't do the problem.